Hi, Murray from MBM. Our last episode we showed you a few rudiments, or Jared did, I watched, and that's the way it should be. In this episode we're talking to conductors of school bands and drummers of school bands, particularly beginners. It's really funny, but we often tend to dump beginner percussionists, or we often tend to put the kids that can't perhaps handle a clarinet. We go, oh, you'd be a great drummer, yeah, fantastic. And yet, percussionists are the people who can absolutely kill your program. So you're putting a lot of pressure on a young guy without giving them a lot of instruction or without giving them a lot of guidance. Here's a few simple tips for the young band conductor. The first thing that I would say to you is don't use a drum kit. Get rid of it. Separate it into bass drum, snare drum and cymbal. You can then have 3 percussionists and they can all rotate and you can train a lot of them. But if you put a drum kit on, that's one player. And when there's one player, he gets a bit tired. You often see it with primary school kids because the kit's bigger than they are and they're pounding away, they're pounding away, they're pounding away. They get tired, so what happens to the tempo? It slows down. They also don't have control over volume as well. So they get louder. Louder and slower is disastrous, and poor old conductor at the front doesn't get a fair go. Older kids, everyone knows how to play a rock beat. Yes, because we teach it in high school here, and every kid knows how to do it, but very few know how to do it successfully, or properly, or when not to do it. That's also part of the deal. So everyone thinks they're a drummer, and a lot of drum studios unfortunately just teach kids popular drum beats. They want them to play like the drummer in a heavy rock band, and they go ahead and do it. Take your drumming to a next step. Break that kid up. Teach the finer things about playing. Teach volume. Teach rhythm. Teach drum control. If necessary, practice without your drums for a term and then bring them in later. You may also find that in a lot of bands and things, drummers become the centre of attention. Everyone thinks they can play and it's really easy and we make them a special person. It's the hardest thing to do. One other hint too, if you are using a drum kit, if you choose that that's the way you're going and you've got a young primary school drummer, take a hint from a good friend of mine. Take one tom-tom off. And you have a 4-piece kit, perfectly adequate, or a 3-piece kit, whichever you prefer. But where the tom sits, there's a space, and that's where your music stand goes. Because that way, your drummer is actually looking at you. Most kids don't have the ability to look out the corner of their eye. So where do we put the stand on most drums? Right next to the hi-hat, because that's where it's close, it fits, and they can turn pages. So they're sitting in there, they're here, you're there, they're not going to see you. Put it in a position, make it easy for them. And lastly, think about your drummers. Often we just put them in places and we put the kids in that can't coordinate. We've all seen that child that has the coordination skills of an ant on ice skates. It just doesn't happen. Nothing wrong with that. But we tend to go, oh, he can't play clarinet because he can't get his fingers right. Or he can't play trumpet because he can't get the embouchure right. So what do? We'll put him on drums. We want to include him. Make sure you're not making a rod for his back. Make sure that you are not turning around and going, mate, we're putting you in the drums so we can forget you. And then you become louder and more dominant. And because we're not paying attention to you, become stronger. And suddenly your whole ensemble is in jeopardy. No. If you're going to put a person who without coordination into percussion, make sure you're tailoring the requirements to their needs and make sure that you're encouraging them to be the best they can be. That's the way to go. The other thing about percussion is not just a drum kit, yet most kids will say it's a drum kit. And there'll be further in this series where we look at some alternate drums, some alternate percussion that can have great fun with it. But also think about teaching people to read notation, read drum rhythms, read keyboard, put them on a glockenspiel. Make it happen. Spread the love. if you like. Put percussionists around. That way they're not just a drummer, they're a percussionist, they're a rounded musician. And I'll tell you what, you'll suddenly find they've got one of the most difficult jobs in the band. And you put your best there. Anyone that goes on to drums as a young kid has my admiration. Anyone who goes on to percussion has my respect. Don't let your drum kit ruin your band. Separate it, teach it, embrace it, make it the best. See you at the other end.